Hello everyone, welcome to our next lesson on Government Goes to War. So here are our objectives and standards. Explain how the government enacted policies to support the war effort. Identify the goals of the Office of Price Administration. And recognize the importance of the War Production Board. And take a look at the standards too, please. Okay, vocabulary. Office of Price Administration, the OPA. The War Production Board, the WPB. And rationing. So think about this. How can government change the economy to support a war effort? What are some different ways that a government could do that? And then our essential question, what did the government do to support the war effort? So if you remember from our last lesson, we looked at how Americans in general, the public, is going to mobilize and support the war effort through working in industry or signing up for the military or whatever the case may be. Now the government supported a lot of those policies, but the government also can do some economic things as well to support the war effort. Okay, so with an increase in war production, there were less consumer goods for people to buy. So this supply dropped while demand rose quickly. And what this causes in reality is an extreme rise in the price of products. Roosevelt comes up with a solution to stop, this impending rise of prices and this incoming crisis. So Roosevelt created the Office of Price Administration, or the OPA, and what they did was they froze the price of most goods. Okay, so what this does is this stops the rising price of, like a can of soup or, a carton of eggs. That way people can afford it and it doesn't create some type of economic struggle for the American public. Congress also raised income taxes and expanded to include those who had never paid it before. Of course, we don't necessarily like when our taxes go up, but in times of war, sometimes it is necessary sometimes. So the higher taxes also reduce demand of these certain goods. So people are going to be able to spend less of their money, so they're not going to be going out and necessarily worrying about the price of things or buying certain items because they don't have that money because the taxes are higher. So it was a cyclical type of program. They were also encouraged to use their extra money that they had to buy war bonds. We talked about war bonds in World War I as well, and they were used to help support the war effort. The government also needed to ensure production for the war effort. So remember we talked about a lot of the industries that transferred what they were making to produce things for the war. So the War Production Board, or the WPB, was in charge of directing industries on what to produce. They also worked to organize collection drives for scrap iron, tin, paper, cooking fat, and all these items are going to be able to be recycled to help the war effort. Here's a poster calling for people to save their, recycling things. You see the papers there, the tin, other things. Not sure what's in the bucket there, but other things like that. And it's to help support the war effort. All those things could be recycled and used by the troops. In 1943, the Smith-Conley Anti-Strike Act also went into effect. It limited the right of workers to strike in industries that were critical to the war effort, so such as like coal or oil, things that the troops needed. Because if these industries did go on strike, it could cause problems and it could cause a shortage for the troops. So what this also said is that the president had the power to take over plants if they did go on strike. So again, just to continue the war effort and continue support for the troops. The Office of Price Administration also enacted a policy of rationing for Americans. Rationing is a fixed amount of goods necessary for the war effort, such as food, clothing, or gasoline. Some of these ideas were meatless Mondays, were some of the concepts. And I know I spoke to my grandmother, and my grandfather discussed this as well growing up during World War II, that they remember their families having gasoline ration cards that their parents or their family members were only allowed to go get gasoline for their vehicles on certain days. So if you had say like the letter A or B or a certain color, or whatever the case may be, you were only allowed to go get gasoline on those days. Say like maybe Monday and Wednesday was your day, and then this again helped save gasoline and oil for the troops. And another way Americans also saved gasoline and oil was by carpooling or riding bikes to help save gasoline. So just to kind of wrap it up here. So President Roosevelt and his administration enacted organizations and policies to support the war effort. The War Production Board, the Office of Price Administration, both these organizations were created to help support the war effort for the troops. And Americans also joined the war effort through labor and rationing. Americans went to work in industries, and they also, made sacrifices for themselves, like I said, in terms of meatless Mondays or gasoline, or even recycling, their tin or their, their paper, things they didn't need to help support the people who were fighting in the Pacific and in Europe. Okay. That's all I have for this lesson. So again, please make sure you submit the questions, and I will see and talk to you later.